Our next interview is with Chick Goldsmith, who used to have an open shop and no longer does.
That is
and,
true.
Chick, I'm going to ask you the same question I ask everybody to start off. Tell us a little bit about your background, family, schools, where you grew up, kind of influences you had that made you think in terms of books.
Well, I grew up in New York City. I was born in New York City in 1941, went to school there. My parents wanted me to be a school teacher because that was the only occupation they knew that was immune to the Depression. And I went to college wanting to be a journalist, found out that majoring in English had nothing to do with journalism, discovered sociology, which I was quite interested in, did a master's and PhD in sociology at the University of Chicago, got married, taught, began collecting books about American sociology. And the University of Chicago had a great tradition, and the University of Chicago sociology series I collected, and that was that plus used bookstores in New York were my introduction to books. I did have an academic career. I didn't get tenure in 1975. I knew a bookseller. I knew an academic who was a part-time bookseller, and I thought, I'll do what he's doing. I'll do a little academia, a little books. I started doing books. I got absolutely sucked into it. I loved it. And I was out of academia. And in 1983, I opened an open shop. I had the shop until 3 months ago. So 24 years of an open shop. I was a reader. I was an accumulator of books, and then grew into a collector. And then one day in a bookstore, a bookseller asked me if I was a dealer. And all of a sudden I thought, my God, it's true. I mean, collectors begin to get some of the skill set. And that plus the tenure, plus the model of Brad Gray, Folkways Scholarly Books, who was a part-time academic. And I was into books.
Who were some of the people when you started in the trade that acted as sort of like mentors, or who were helpful to you and gave you some good advice?
Well, a moment before the mentors, I remember every book dealer in Hyde Park in Chicago. And I wrote in my ABA application that I remember the layouts of their stores. I remember where things were. Even though I was an academic and had no intention of becoming a bookseller, bookstores were very important to me. And I also knew that some of the professors in my department at Chicago had helped underwrite some of the stores in Hyde Park, and I had a lot of respect for that. As I got into the trade, I didn't know New York booksellers. I knew some of the Chicago booksellers as a customer. But early on, I met Larry McGilvery, who was a graduate of Pomona College and who came to Claremont. And I admired Larry a good deal. And he was a model, and he was to some extent, and he was my sponsor in coming into the ABAA. When I was thinking of starting a store, I went around to bookstores to look at them as stores, not just to look at the books.
Yeah.
And Alice Lee in Pasadena, a woman who had a store called Bookcase Books, said to me, spend a whole day in the store. And I did. And that was a very good thing to do because I was able to watch her, and she was extremely helpful to me. Over the years, any time that someone's told me they wanted to go into the book business, I've said to them, spend a day in the store with me.
Yeah.
No one has took me up.
No one.
No one. And that was a little proof of the pudding to them. Yeah. I mean, it's not easy to spend a full day in a bookstore unless you're...
You got to really love it, man.
You got to really love it, man. That's right. So Alice Lee was very helpful to me and a good friend and still is. Dirk Cable, who was a very good Pasadena bookseller, was also someone I liked. I remember that Dick Weatherford had an article in AB about appraisal. And from the beginning, I was interested in appraisal. And his article said something to the effect, I haven't thought of this in a long time, that you could do appraisal, and he said something to the effect of be responsible to the book at the same time. And that impressed me, even though I don't know Dick Weatherford except to say hello.
Yeah.
But that impressed me, and appraisal has become a big part, and for years been a big part of my life in the book business. Over the years, I have met many people in the ABAA who I have grown to admire tremendously. To me, writing a description of a book is a responsibility, and I take it very seriously, and I have dozens of models of people who just do tremendous work and on their books. Knowing what you sell, to me, is part of the kick of being a bookseller and also part of the responsibility of it. And I mean, I can just think of so many people in so many different fields, yourself included, Bill Reese, Stuart Bennett, I could name on and on, and who take knowing what they sell as a responsibility.
Why did you close the shop, Jack?
I closed the shop not just because this is a very hard time for open shops, for all the usual internet-driven reasons, although that's certainly a factor. But I am 66 years old. I heard myself saying to myself that you have a lot of back-burnered projects, and I heard the words, if not now, when? And that's fierce to come to grips with. Yeah. It really is. It's even hard to, I mean, I'm not embarrassed to say it, but it's hard to say it.
Yeah.
And I have writing projects I want to do. I want to spend more time on things outside of running a shop. I loved the shop.
I know you did.
I absolutely loved it. And I do not leave it with a sense of relief, except in one way. Taylor Bowie told me that when he's asked if he misses his open shop, he says, I miss the shop, but not running it. Yeah. And that's a good distinction. Shops are tough.
Yeah, I see it myself.
Yeah.
Chick, obviously, the internet has played a part in all of our businesses.
Sure has.
And since it's come in, was it an easy or a difficult transition for you to make? Computerizing, internet, how did it affect you?
In different ways. From a research point of view, it's been an absolute marvel, and I love it to pieces. The quality of the research work you can do is just expanded tremendously, and in that sense, I love it. Selling on the internet was a kick for a while. It's no longer a kick. I don't like it. Yeah. It's not this isn't a principled objection. It's just I don't like the process. It also, I learned, did not fit the kind of work style I have, which is to get deeply involved in an appraisal project or a collection development project. And that made it hard to, on a daily basis, tend to the internet orders, which you have to do.
You have to.
You absolutely have to do. So I have actually moved away from the direct internet selling. I send books to one or two, to 3 dealers, and they give me half. And I just send them the book, and I tell them, what you do with it is your business.
Your business, yeah.
Send me half. And they're people I trust, and I'm happy to do it that way. And since I mentioned the word trust, I will say that that's one of the really great things about this trade, is the ability to trust the people who are in it. I just handed one volume of an 80-volume set to a dealer I've never seen before. And he walked away with
trust.
it. That's trust. And I don't own that thing outright. I have it on consignment.
Well, he better bring that volume 1 back then. And he probably most likely will.
I think he will, yes.
If you were entering the book trade today, Chick, would you? Could you?
I remember my father, who was a chef, told me I should do anything I wanted to in life except what he did because it was too hard. But sure, I would. Yeah. I mean, God help us. There's something. I mean, it either resonates with you or it doesn't, and it did.
It's in your bloodstream.
And it is in my bloodstream. I loved being an academic. I did not leave it with pleasure, but I have no regrets about the choice I made, and I feel very good in the book trade.
Will you continue to issue catalogs?
I will, yes. I'm doing very active appraisal work. I'll continue doing book fairs. I'll issue catalogs. I'll quote to libraries and quote to collectors.
You just won't have an open shop.
I just won't have an open shop. Yeah. No, people, in fact, I was very conscious when I closed the store of trying never to let anyone use the word retire.
Yeah.
Not because it was an insulting word, but because I'm not retired.
No, far from it.
And I don't know anyone who does in the trade. They just change their way of doing it.
You know, old booksellers don't retire. They just fade away.
That's right. And I mean, I think of Barney Rosenthal and reducing the number of books he deals with and focusing in, and that strikes me as just wonderful.
Strikes me as a good idea, too,
yeah,
at this stage
right.
of the game.
Right.
What do you perceive as the greatest challenges facing the antiquarian book trade as we go forward in the next decade?
I doubt if I have anything creative to say here, but it used to be that bookstores, general stock bookstores that also had rare books, had a base of a diverse clientele, some of whom were readers and some of whom were scholars. And those people are, I think, falling away. And I would, in pessimistic moments, I think that the book trade will go the way of letterpress printing, and it will become an art. And it will. The only people interested in books will be interested in them as individual art objects.
Physical objects?
Yes. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with being interested in a book as a physical object. Everyone in the trade is. But the interest in content may attenuate. And certainly the base of people who are interested in books will shift toward people who are interested in the book only as object. And that I lament. I'm sorry to see that pass. I have a collection of bookmarks. This is not unrelated. I have a collection of bookmarks. I've donated it to the Huntington Library. I'm concerned about bookmarks as objects, but also bookmarking, how people mark books. And what I'm doing is taking often a book that perfectly normal book and one that may be only worth 10 or 15 bucks, but I know who marked it, and I'm writing up who this person was and what their purposes in marking it in different ways were. A scholar who marks an edition of Macaulay's letters for an edition of Macaulay that he's doing and so forth. Because I think to myself, in 200, 300, 400, 500 years, what are people going to look back on this object as? Will they understand it?
You say to a kid today, what kind of records are you buying? And they look at you like you have three heads. No kids know what a record is.
Exactly so.
I mean, so there's going to be a transition. Right. It's going to happen in every field.
In every field, and
but you know, it is strange. We got a couple of minutes.
We live
left,
in a transitional time.
Oh, that's for sure.
It's an astounding time to be in the book trade.
It is. When you first started in the trade, did you start in a bookshop, or did you have some period between when you left academia and became a bookseller that you didn't have a shop? I
started without a shop. I started quoting. I quoted to International Bookfinder.
Me too.
Yeah, I mean the old AB. There was this little thing about this big library bookseller or something like that.
It still exists, you know.
I didn't know that.
And remember the clique?
Yeah.
From
sure.
England?
Yeah. Well, I started quoting, and I also started searching for people in town. And then there was a bookstore in town, and I apprenticed myself to the bookseller.
Who was the bookseller?
His name was Don. I forget his last name, but
where was he located?
He was in the old packing house in Claremont, the old Citrus packing house. Don was not a model. I think I learned Don played fast and loose, and I saw him play fast and loose. But it was basically a little bit of working for him part-time, and but a lot of quoting.
Lots of quoting.
Yeah, a lot of quoting. And then I decided to open a shop, and I jumped in, and I made the requisite number of mistakes times 4.
Did you start off as a generalist?
I did indeed start off as a generalist, and developed an early specialty in Western Americana and California press books because of an opportunity. Yeah. At first, I was going to focus on books in the social sciences, and particularly sociology. I very quickly learned, you're smiling because you know what I'm going to say. You do not become a specialist in sociology.
Not if you want to make any money.
No. I mean, John Gatch did it in psychology, but that's partly because there's an MD base of moneyed collectors there. Ron Rubin with economics, fine. There's a stock market specialist, but sociology, anthropology, well, Lou Collins did anthropology,
for a long time. Now he's retired.
Yeah.
Although Lou's still working on the Seattle Book Fair, so he's not really retired. He's got a split in someplace.
Good. Well, I started off, yes, as a generalist, and opportunity pushed me in different directions. I've always been interested in scholarly books, but Western Americana.
Did you buy some kind of collection that got you shifted?
I met a librarian who thought I was trustworthy and offered to sell me books. And however, knew how wet behind the ears I was and required me to come in with auction records and to support what I was doing. Yeah. And her name was Tanya Rizzo, still is Tanya Rizzo. And Tanya was responsible to her institution, but very helpful to me. Yeah. And left working for the Claremont colleges because of Stephen Blumberg, the biggest book thief of the 20th century, because his thefts out of Honnold Library took place on her watch, even though she was, I don't think, culpable in... No. I mean, certainly... No, she wasn't involved, at all. Not. But I don't even think she was culpable for security things.
This guy was a professional burglar.
Bro, my God, he was good. He got... Indians of North America, Curtis. Yeah. He walked out with 40 volumes of Curtis, which
I still don't know how that happened.
That's 8 foot of large folios.
It's more than 8 feet, Jim.
Yeah, it's more than 8 feet.
If you think about it, it's probably more like 12 feet or 14 feet.
Yeah.
And anyway, we've got time for one little more question that might elicit some interest. If a young bookseller comes to you, Chick, and says, what is the one thing you would advise me to do as a young bookseller, what would you advise them?
Well, the answer used to be buy reference books.
Well, we're not talking about what used to be.
Right. I guess relationships are more important than single sales, and relationships with other people are...
It's interesting that you said that. You're the first one who's brought up the relationship issue. Elaborate a little on that while we still have a few minutes.
Well, you want good relationships with a client base, and you want good relationships with dealers. And this involves give and take. It involves not getting the last ounce out of everything. It involves understanding. It involves quid pro quo. It involves tolerance of people's quirks. It involves a long-run perspective with people. I mean, from a dealer-client point of view, it involves giving clients first shot at things, in return for which you often get allegiance from people. You give information, you help people with their buying, even when you don't benefit from it directly. But in the long run, probably everyone benefits from good relationships. Yeah, I guess that's what.
Relationships,
relationships.
and not just with clients, but with librarians and
Absolutely,
dealers as well.
Absolutely. And
I think one of the big things that I can remember is there was far less collegiality 25, 30 years ago than there is now. I think booksellers are really starting to stick together and have relationships with each other.
I think that's probably true. One of the things that is nice about this trade is that it is possible to be a competitor with somebody and a friend.
Yeah.
And I tell people this, there are certain questions dealers do not ask each other, or they're very careful about how they ask. I mean, who's your best customer for? Where did you get this collection?
How much did you pay?
How much did you pay? What's your best source for a certain type of book? But on the other hand, there's tremendous cooperation, and that's very gratifying. And I know when I ask a question of people, they're not going to lie to me. Yeah. If they're not going to answer, they won't answer. Yeah. But they're not going to lie or mislead me. Right. And the few people who do get a reputation pretty quick as someone to stay away from. And this is a trait of individualists. I mean, an old observation, but true. But it's a pretty good bunch of people. Yeah. And I feel happy with my choice. Well, I'm very lucky with my choice.
Well, thanks for the interview.
Well, thank you. This was a lot of fun.
Okay, good. I'm glad you liked it.
Thank you.